Hey guys, tonight we're stepping away from the familiar, away from the well-trodden paths of history, and into a place where history itself breathes a different kind of air. So, dim the lights, maybe let the room go quiet enough to hear your own breathing. Let's drift together into the deep, into the silence, beneath a city that guards more than just faith. Drop a comment telling me where you are in the dark right now. I like to picture these stories stretching across time zones while you drift towards sleep. What if the first words humanity ever wrote weren't myths? What if they were the desperate testimony of survivors trying to record a world that had already ended? And what if the most powerful institution on Earth has been quietly, meticulously classifying these testimonies as its deepest secret, not because they are false, but because they are too true? Imagine for a moment descending, not just into the earth, but into a different kind of time. Picture yourself standing at the edge of Vatican City, not looking up at St. Peter's dome, but looking down, sensing the vast, intricate network of passages and chambers that lie beneath the cobbled streets. This isn't just a basement. It is a subterranean city of secrets, a labyrinth carved out of rock and faith, maintained with an almost obsessive dedication to silence and preservation. The air down here is different. It's cool, almost sterile, a constant, controlled temperature that whispers of ancient air conditioning, designed not for human comfort, but for the delicate skin of parchment and the brittle edges of clay. You can almost taste the dust of ages, not the gritty dust of the street, but a fine, almost ethereal powder that has settled on countless forgotten words. The light is always dim here, a soft amber glow that barely pushes back the encroaching shadows. It is not the harsh, revealing light of day, but a gentle, almost reverent illumination, as if even the photons themselves are asked to tread lightly, to respect the profound stillness. Corridors stretch out, seemingly endless, branching off into more corridors, each turn leading deeper into the heart of this silent metropolis. The walls are thick, ancient stone, absorbing all sound, all echo. Your footsteps, if you were allowed to make any, would feel disrespectful, a clumsy intrusion into a space that has learned to hold its breath for centuries. This is a place where every whisper of the outside world is muffled, then absorbed until nothing remains but the quiet hum of the climate control and the even quieter pulse of history itself. There are no clocks down here, no windows to mark the passage of the sun. Time in this underground sanctuary becomes fluid, irrelevant. A century feels like a moment, a millennium like a breath. Every artifact, every manuscript, every forgotten decree rests in a state of suspended animation, waiting for eyes that may never see them, for hands that may never touch them. This isn't just an archive, it is a mausoleum of knowledge, a vast, silent repository where the most dangerous truths are not destroyed, but carefully, meticulously, tucked away, out of sight, out of mind, in the hope that they might simply fade from collective memory, like a forgotten dream. The very air feels heavy with unspoken stories, with the weight of decisions made in shadows, of truths deemed too potent for the light of day. It's a silence that isn't empty, but full of the whispers of the past, compressed into an almost physical presence, waiting to be heard by those who know how to listen beyond the veil of noise. The vastness of this underground realm is almost incomprehensible. Imagine walking through an endless forest, but instead of trees, you are surrounded by towering shelves. Not just a few shelves, not just a room full, but a staggering 85 kilometers of them. That's 53 miles. 53 miles of tightly packed wooden and metal shelves, stretching into the dim distance, disappearing into the perpetual twilight of the archives. Each shelf is burdened with the weight of centuries, groaning softly under the silent pressure of history. Every single volume, every rolled parchment, every carefully bound collection of letters and edicts represents a fragment of human experience, a piece of a puzzle that the world above has long forgotten or deliberately overlooked. Picture yourself, if you can, slowly, deliberately, tracing your gloved fingers along the spines of these ancient tomes. The cool, dry air shifts subtly as you move, stirring the fine, almost invisible dust motes that dance in the narrow shafts of light like tiny ethereal dancers in a forgotten ballet. The smell is intoxicating, a rich, complex aroma of aged paper, leather, and dry ink, a scent that speaks of countless hours spent in quiet study, of secrets meticulously recorded, of thoughts captured and preserved against the relentless march of time. You pass by row after row, aisle after aisle, and the sheer scale of it begins to exert a hypnotic effect. The repetitive pattern of the shelves, the endless succession of forgotten titles, the deep, pervasive silence, it all conspires to lull the mind into a state of profound contemplation, a gentle drifting towards the edge of consciousness. Each book, each scroll, each fragile bundle of documents represents a voice from a bygone era, a whisper from a civilization that has long since turned to dust. There are papal bulls, royal decrees, personal letters from saints and sinners, maps that chart lost continents, and scientific treatises that predate modern understanding. And within this vast ocean of documented human endeavor, there are other items, carefully categorized, meticulously preserved, yet never openly displayed. These are the texts that do not fit the established narrative, the words that challenge the very foundations upon which the institution above ground was built. Their presence here, in this silent, endless library, is a testament to their enduring power, their potential to reshape not just history, but belief itself. The visual of these endless shelves, stretching beyond the reach of the eye, into an almost infinite expanse of knowledge, becomes a metaphor for the boundless depths of the past, a gentle current pulling you further into a state of deep, undisturbed calm. The whispers of 1,000 forgotten languages seem to blend into a soft, consistent hum, a lullaby woven from the threads of history. Now shift your focus from the quiet, cool air of the archive to the scorching, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia. It is the late 19th, early 20th century. The air shimmers with heat, carrying the scent of dry earth and ancient ash. Dust storms sweep across the vast, empty landscapes, revealing the broken teeth of forgotten cities, the silent witnesses to a civilization that predates recorded history as we know it. British, French, German, and American archaeologists, driven by a thirst for knowledge and the thrill of discovery, are painstakingly unearthing these sites. They are digging through layers of time, revealing monumental ziggurats, intricate palaces, and most importantly, tens of thousands of clay tablets. These aren't just artifacts, they're the very first books, the earliest attempts by humanity to record its story, its laws, its myths, its understanding of the cosmos. Imagine the excitement, the trembling hands of the excavators, as they carefully brush away millennia of sand and sediment, revealing the crisp, precise cuneiform script etched into the cool, damp clay. These tablets, sometimes no bigger than the palm of your hand, sometimes larger and more substantial, are carefully packed into crates. They embark on long, arduous journeys across deserts and oceans, eventually arriving in the grand institutions of Europe. Fundwhy, the British Museum, the Louvre, the Pergamon, but a significant portion, deemed particularly sensitive, particularly enigmatic, found its way not to public display, but directly into the hands of a different kind of institution, one that operated in shadows, the Vatican. These packages from the East were treated with an unusual urgency, a distinct departure from the slow, bureaucratic process usually associated with such vast collections. They weren't catalogs for public display. They were whisked away deep into the newly constructed, climate-controlled vaults beneath the Vatican City. Each tablet, each fragment, was meticulously examined by a select group of scholars, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of gaslight or early electric lamps, their expressions a mixture of awe and profound, unsettling recognition. And then they were filed away, not under general categories, but under a specific chilling designation: sanctum, sacred. Secret. Why? Because these clay tablets, these echoes from the dawn of civilization, told a story far older than the Bible. They spoke of creation not in terms of a singular, all-powerful deity, but of multiple beings, those who from heaven to earth came. They described a flood that mirrored biblical accounts, yet placed it within a context of cosmic cycles and divine intervention that was disturbingly literal. They contained astronomical charts that depicted planetary orbits and celestial bodies unknown to ancient man, and mathematical equations that suggested a level of sophistication far beyond what was believed possible for a society existing 5,000 years ago. The scribes who etched these stories into clay believed they were preserving the truth, a memory passed down through generations, not inventing a myth. And the Vatican scholars poring over these ancient texts in the silent depths of their archives understood the profound implications. These tablets were not just historical documents. They were a direct challenge to the very foundation of their faith, a pre-biblical narrative that spoke of origins and interventions that would shatter the carefully constructed theological framework of millennia. So, the dust of Mesopotamia settled, not on museum shelves, but on classified files. The whispers of Sumerian priests were silenced, not by erasure, but by the impenetrable walls of the Vatican Secret Archives, where they have rested undisturbed for over a century, waiting for a world ready to listen to a truth far stranger and far more ancient than any scripture. You are deep within the earth, now the air cool and dry, carrying only the faint scent of aged paper and stone. The silence here is profound, a heavy blanket woven from centuries of unspoken words. Imagine a whisper, barely audible, echoing from these stacks, a question that has haunted scholars for generations, locked away from the light. It begins with a single word, a sacred word, foundational to an entire civilization's understanding of its origin. In the ancient Hebrew texts, the word for God appears as Elohim. For centuries, translations have rendered this as singular, God, reinforcing the bedrock of monotheistic belief. But the scribes in the deepest chambers of the Vatican archives, those who dedicated their lives to the meticulous study of original languages, found something unsettling. They traced the lineage of this word, not just through Hebrew, but back through Aramaic, through Akkadian, all the way to the oldest known written language, Sumerian. And in the Sumerian source material, the truth, or what they perceived as such, began to shimmer. Picture a scholar bent over a fragile clay tablet, his breath held, his gloved finger tracing cuneiform symbols under the dim, focused beam of a lamp. He sees the symbol for divine being, but it is not alone. It is accompanied by markers that indicate plurality, multiplicity. It is not God, it is gods. The El and Elohim they discovered was not a singular majestic entity, but a collective, a council, a group. The implications, like a slow-burning fuse, began to ignite a quiet panic. If the very first words, the very foundation of creation, spoke not of a solitary omnipotent being, but of a pantheon, a collection of powerful entities, then the entire theological edifice of monotheism began to sway. Imagine the tremor that ran through those hollowed halls. The singular, unified God, the cornerstone of faith for billions, suddenly fractured into many, each with their own will, their own agenda, their own celestial politics. It wasn't just a linguistic nuance. It was an earthquake beneath the soul of Western civilization. The Sumerian tablets spoke of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. They were not abstract spiritual forces, but beings with names, with families, with rivalries, with physical forms. They ate, they drank, they traveled. They were powerful, yes, but they were also relatable. Too relatable, perhaps, for the architects of a divine, untouchable deity. The Vatican scholars in their quiet studies, in their isolated contemplation, realized that the plural Elohim in the Old Testament was not a poetic flourish, but a direct, if later obscured, echo of the Sumerian Anunnaki. It was a memory, a faint impression, of a time when humanity looked up not to a single, abstract creator, but to a group of powerful interventionist gods who walked among them. The clay held the secret, etched into its very surface, waiting for diligent eyes to uncover it. This wasn't a matter of belief versus non-belief. It was a matter of who created, how they created, and why. And if the who was a diverse group, then the why became far more complex, far less benign than the simple benevolence of a singular, loving God. The silent implication was that the universe and humanity's place within it was far messier, far more arbitrary than the sacred texts allowed. And that messiness, that plurality, was a danger to the carefully constructed order of the world. So, the tablets were filed away, categorized, and the singular translation of Elohim was reinforced, becoming the truth that would echo through history. While the plural truth slept in the dark, the whispers continue, guiding you deeper into the labyrinth of forgotten narratives. From the unsettling plurality of the creators, our journey now takes us to the very cradle of humanity, a place of innocence and perfection, or so we've been told. The Garden of Eden. The very name evokes lush green, gentle breezes, a blissful existence. But the ancient texts, those carefully guarded clay fragments, paint a different picture, a far more utilitarian one, stripped of its poetic veneer. Imagine the Sumerian word Eden. It rolls off the tongue like a soft sigh of wind across an arid plain. Not a garden in the sense of a paradise for leisure, but a functional space. The Vatican scholars, meticulously comparing the biblical narrative with the Sumerian originals, found a stark divergence. The Eden described in the clay tablets was less a divine playground and more an operational zone, a place of work, a designated area where specific tasks were carried out by specific entities. Picture it not as a natural wonder, but as an engineered landscape. A vast, enclosed area perhaps, where resources were cultivated, where something precious was grown or developed. Some texts even described it as a house of righteousness, or a place where life is drawn forth. These were not metaphors for spiritual bliss, they were descriptions of practical function. The Sumerian Eden was a place of production, a site of intervention, where the gods, the Anunnaki, were actively engaged in a project. And what was that project? The texts hinted at something far more scientific, or perhaps agricultural than theological. They spoke of the Anunnaki arriving on Earth, finding it rich in certain minerals, but lacking something crucial for their own needs. They needed laborers. They needed a workforce. And the Eden was where this project of creating that workforce began. It was a biolab, perhaps, or a carefully managed plantation, designed not for the enjoyment of early humanity, but for its utility. The human-like creatures in Eden were not placed there to wander freely and enjoy the fruits of the land. They were created, or perhaps modified, to serve, to dig, to mine, to cultivate. The narratives speak of humanity being fashioned in the image of the Anunnaki, not for spiritual communion, but for practical resemblance, for the ability to understand and carry out instructions. The forbidden tree of knowledge, so central to the biblical fall from grace, takes on a different meaning here. It wasn't about moral transgression. It was about the acquisition of information that threatened the Anunnaki's control. Knowledge that could make the laborers too independent, too aware of their own potential, too discerning of their master's intentions. The serpent, too, is recontextualized. Not a symbol of evil, but perhaps a dissident, a member of the Anunnaki who disagreed with the treatment of humanity, or who saw the potential in these new beings and chose to uplift them. The act of eating from the tree wasn't a sin, it was an awakening to self-awareness, to the ability to reproduce independently, to the very knowledge that made them less like tools and more like partners, or even rivals. The scholars in the archive piecing together these fragments must have felt a profound disquiet. The comfortable narrative of a benevolent God placing innocent humans in a perfect paradise, only for them to fall through disobedience, dissolved into a colder, more clinical scenario. Humanity in the Sumerian account was not born of divine love, but of divine necessity. We were not children of God, but subjects of the Anunnaki. And the Garden of Eden was not a gift, but a facility, a place where humanity's very existence was tied to the service of those who came from the stars. This truth, stark and unyielding, was far too disruptive for the delicate balance of faith, and so, like the plural Elohim, it was carefully, quietly filed away. The air thickens with the weight of ancient secrets, the quiet hum of the climate control, the only sound against the vast silence. Our journey through these forbidden texts now leads us to another category of suppressed knowledge, a book deemed too dangerous, too revealing, to ever be included in the sacred canon. The Book of Enoch. For centuries, it has existed on the fringes, revered by some, condemned by others, but always carrying the faint scent of something profoundly unsettling. Imagine the scholars, their hands trembling slightly as they turn the brittle pages of an ancient copy of Enoch, perhaps one recovered from Ethiopia, or a fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls. This book, excluded from the official biblical narrative, speaks of beings known as the Watchers. These are not abstract angels. They are described with vivid detail, a distinct presence, a profound influence, and as the Vatican's researchers cross-reference these descriptions with the Sumerian tablets, a chilling connection began to emerge. The Watchers of Enoch were, in essence, the Anunnaki of Sumer. The Book of Enoch details how these Watchers descended to Earth, not as benevolent spirits, but as powerful physical beings. They saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful, and took them as wives. This act, so explicitly forbidden in later religious texts, was presented here as a foundational event, and from these unions giants were born, the Nephilim, beings of immense stature and power who roamed the earth. This wasn't merely a romantic dalliance, it was a profound trans-species interaction, a blurring of the lines between the divine and the mortal. But it was not just the physical mingling that caused alarm. The Watchers, according to Enoch, taught humanity forbidden knowledge. They unveiled secrets that were never meant for human minds. Metallurgy, the art of working with metals, of forging weapons and tools. The creation of cosmetics and jewelry, sparking vanity and adornment. The knowledge of astronomy, of tracking the stars, of understanding the movements of celestial bodies. Even the art of writing, of deciphering symbols and recording history, was attributed to them. Consider the implications. The Church, through its millennia, has often positioned itself as the sole custodian of divine knowledge, the gatekeeper of truth, the interpreter of God's will. But here, in Enoch, was a narrative where knowledge, vital knowledge, was bestowed upon humanity by external, non-divine, alien entities. These Watchers were not God's messengers in the traditional sense. They were instructors, mentors, perhaps even manipulators, who accelerated human development in ways that bypassed the natural divine order. The fear was not of devils or demons in the conventional sense. The fear, the profound terror that gripped the Vatican scholars, was of alien mentors. Beings who had come to Earth, seen humanity, and decided to intervene, to teach, to guide, to influence. If humanity's advancements, its very civilization, its understanding of the cosmos, its ability to shape its environment were not divinely inspired from above, but rather genetically and intellectually seeded from without, then the entire concept of divine providence crumbled. These Watchers, these Anunnaki, were not ethereal spirits. They had technology, they had sciences, they had a hierarchy. They were not magical, they were advanced. And the knowledge they imparted was not spiritual revelation, but practical, scientific, sometimes dangerous instruction. The Book of Enoch, in its stark honesty, laid bare a history where humanity was not a passive recipient of grace, but an active participant in an experiment, guided by powerful non-human teachers. To acknowledge Enoch as canon would be to acknowledge that humanity's awakening was not a singular, divine act, but a series of interventions. It would mean accepting that the very foundations of human civilization were built upon forbidden knowledge bestowed by beings who were neither angels nor demons, but something else entirely, something physical, something powerful, something from the stars. And that truth, that profound reframing of human history was far too dangerous to be allowed into the light. So, the Book of Enoch, like the plural Elohim and the functional Eden, was relegated to the shadows, a secret whispered only among those who dared to listen, locked away in the deepest archives, its pages slowly turning to dust, but its message echoing through the quiet. the most unsettling truth, the one that hums like a low, persistent frequency beneath the dust and the silence of the Vatican archives, touches the very essence of human identity. Imagine turning a page, a fragile piece of parchment, or perhaps unrolling a scroll of papyrus, the ink faded but still legible, detailing not a miraculous creation from divine breath and earthly clay, but something far more clinical. The Vatican's most profound fear, meticulously catalogued and locked away, is the idea that humanity itself is not a spontaneous act of grace, but a deliberate, calculated intervention. The ancient Sumerian tablets, the ones labeled sanctum, speak of a process, an experiment. They describe the Anunnaki, not as gods in the spiritual sense, but as highly advanced beings, a species with a profound understanding of biology, genetics, and the very blueprint of life. These texts, quietly translated and retranslated in hushed chambers, suggest that early hominids, the upright walkers of this planet, were not simply left to evolve on their own. Instead, they became the raw material, the Anunnaki, facing their own labor needs. Their own existential dilemmas on a distant, dying world saw potential. They describe a mingling, a blending of their own sophisticated genetic material with that of Homo erectus. It wasn't a magic wand, but a slow, painstaking process of gene splicing, of biological template manipulation. Think of it less as a miracle and more as a sophisticated form of genetic engineering. Humanity, in this terrifying narrative, becomes a hybrid, a worker drone, a creature imbued with just enough of the Anunnaki's intelligence, their capacity for language, for abstract thought, to be useful, but not so much as to challenge their creators. This knowledge, if unleashed, would not just challenge the foundations of faith, it would redefine what it means to be human. It would strip away the comforting illusion of divine purpose, replacing it with the chilling reality of a laboratory creation, a biological project. The divine spark, then, is not a gift from an omnipotent deity, but a carefully selected sequence of alien DNA preserved in the very cells that make you. And so the vast silence of the archives becomes a monument to a different kind of fear. Not the fear of evil, but the profound, overwhelming fear of societal collapse. Imagine the weight of millennia of human civilization, built brick by brick, belief by belief, upon the singular, unwavering pillar of a divine creator. The entire framework of morality, law, purpose, and hope rests upon this foundation. If this foundation were to crumble, if the story of creation were revealed to be a cold, biological procedure, a cosmic petri dish experiment, what then? What would become of order? What would become of meaning? The Vatican, in its long history, has always been a steward of order, a keeper of the social contract, even if that contract was often enforced with an iron fist. The documents detailing the Anunnaki intervention were not hidden out of malice, but out of a desperate, perhaps even paternalistic, desire to protect humanity from itself, from the chaos that would surely follow such a revelation. The fear was not that people would suddenly become bad, but that they would become untethered. If their origins were not sacred but scientific, then what claim did any authority have over their souls? The ancient texts, especially those speaking of the Anunnaki's departure and their eventual return, painted a picture of a universe far grander and far more indifferent than any scripture dared to suggest. To maintain the fragile cohesion of human society, to keep the narrative intact, the secret had to be sealed. It was a choice made in the shadows, a heavy burden carried by a select few, to preserve a comforting illusion in the face of a disturbing truth. The decision was not about hiding a lie, but about safeguarding what they perceived as a necessary fiction, a stable ground upon which humanity could continue to build its fragile existence. The dust motes dancing in the faint light of the archive seemed to carry the weight of that decision, a quiet, almost mournful hum of forgotten purpose. But the silence of the underground archives is not the only silence maintained by the Vatican. High above, on the remote, windswept summit of Mount Graham in Arizona, stands a testament to a different kind of vigilance. It is the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, and within its dome, amongst its array of instruments, is the Lucifer instrument Thundi, an acronym for Large Binocular Telescope near Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research. The name itself, a chilling echo for an institution so deeply rooted in the sacred, speaks volumes. Why does a religious institution ostensibly focused on the heavens of the spiritual realm operate one of the world's most advanced astronomical observatories? Consider the cold, clear nights on that mountaintop. The air is thin, crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant desert. The massive telescope, a silent sentinel, slowly tracks across the velvet blackness, its mirrors gathering the faint light from distant galaxies, from nebulae where stars are born and die. What are they truly searching for in that vast expanse? Is it merely a deeper understanding of God's creation, as they would publicly state? Or is there a more specific, more urgent directive behind the millions of dollars invested in this cutting-edge infrared technology? The ancient Sumerian texts, the ones carefully sequestered beneath satite, Peter's Basilica, speak not only of the Anunnaki's arrival, but also of their eventual departure, and crucially their prophesied return. They speak of a celestial body, sometimes referred to as Nibiru, a wandering planet or system linked to the cycles of these gods. Is the Lucifer telescope, with its capacity to peer through cosmic dust and detect thermal signatures invisible to the naked eye, a quiet vigil, a silent watch for the faint distant glow of a returning presence? The hum of the telescope's motors, the whir of its cooling systems, become a modern echo of ancient anxiety, a technological prayer whispered into the vast, indifferent night, searching for a sign of what might be coming back. The cool air of the archive seems to hum with an unspoken tension, a silent frequency that only those who stand guard over the deepest secrets can truly perceive. For centuries, the highest echelons of the Church have lived with this knowledge, not just of a past presence, but of a promised return. The Sumerian tablets, carefully preserved, meticulously copied, whispered not of a final departure, but of a temporary retreat. They described cycles, cosmic alignments, and the inevitable turning of ages when the heavens would once again open, and those who came from above would descend. Imagine the weight of that prophecy, held in hushed tones within ancient stone walls, passed down through generations of cardinals and pontiffs. It is a vigil that stretches across millennia, a quiet watch kept not for a divine savior, but for cosmic engineers. Picture the late hours in the Vatican, not in the grandeur of St. Peter's, but in a dimly lit office, far from public view. A high-ranking official, perhaps the head of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, sits alone. The only light comes from a single lamp, illuminating geological charts, astronomical calculations, and perhaps a faded reproduction of a Sumerian star map. There is no urgency in their movements, only an enduring, almost mournful patience. They are not just studying ancient texts, they are calculating trajectories. They are not merely interpreting prophecies, they are monitoring the skies. The anxiety isn't a sudden panic, but a deep, pervasive hum beneath the surface of their daily lives. It is the anxiety of a lighthouse keeper, watching the horizon not just for the dawn, but for the storm that the ancient charts predict. The lonely vigil is constant, a quiet burden carried by a select few. It's the feeling of being the only one awake in a sleeping world, knowing what approaches, but unable to share the full scope of that knowledge without shattering the fragile peace. Consider the silence that surrounds such a watch. No grand pronouncements, no public declarations. Just the turning of pages, the soft scratch of a pen making notes in the margins of classified reports. The cool, dry air of the archive is a constant reminder of the physical separation from the world outside, a world that sleeps soundly oblivious to the cosmic clock slowly ticking down towards a moment, charted on clay thousands of years ago. The sky above them, so vast and indifferent, holds both the promise of peace and the potential for profound disruption. They watch it with instruments, with calculations, and with an almost tangible sense of foreboding hope. This isn't about fear in the conventional sense. It is about preparedness. It is about understanding the mechanics of a universe far grander and more intricate than the prevailing narratives allow. The departure of the Anunnaki wasn't an end, but an interlude. The text spoke of a time when certain celestial bodies would align, when the great wanderer would draw near again, and with it, the potential for a new chapter in humanity's story, one that might rewrite everything we thought we knew about our origins and our destiny. This quiet anticipation, this centuries long watch, is the silent heartbeat of the Vatican's deepest secret. It's a silent, almost meditative act of waiting, performed in the hushed corridors of power, under the indifferent gaze of the stars. Yet even the most carefully constructed walls eventually show cracks. The truth, like water seeking its own level, cannot be contained indefinitely. In an age where every whisper can become a roar, where every scanned document can circle the globe in an instant, the meticulously guarded secrets of the Vatican's archives are finding their way into the light. It is not a flood, not an explosion of revelation, but a slow, persistent seep. A drip here, a trickle there, a carefully worded academic paper that hints at anomalies. A leaked document, perhaps just a single page, that opens a window onto a forgotten narrative. Think of it as the gradual erosion of a dam, not a catastrophic breach, but a steady wearing down of the barriers. The information age, with its interconnectedness and its insatiable curiosity, acts as a gentle, persistent current. It seeks out the tiny fissures, the almost invisible cracks in the edifice of secrecy, and through these openings fragments of the story emerge. They appear in the periphery of mainstream thought, in the quiet corners of the internet, in the speculative works of authors and researchers who dare to connect the seemingly disparate dots. There is no need for anger in this unfolding, no call for outrage. The truth, when it finally surfaces, often does so with a soft, almost imperceptible grace. It doesn't demand to be believed, it simply is. And the fact that we are now discussing these possibilities, that these ancient narratives are re-entering our collective consciousness, suggests something profound. Perhaps as a species we are finally ready to look beyond the comfort of our established stories, ready to embrace a cosmic view that is far vaster, far more ancient, and infinitely more complex than we ever imagined. This quiet emergence of truth is not a battle won or lost. It is a natural progression, like a seed pushing through the soil or a river finding a new path to the sea. The gentle pressure of human curiosity, combined with the sheer volume of data now available, makes absolute concealment an impossibility. The old guardians of knowledge, the silent custodians of these profound texts, find their task becoming ever more challenging and perhaps in a quiet way less necessary. The world itself is shifting, preparing to receive these long-held memories. It's a subtle recalibration, a slow awakening to a different kind of history, one that stretches beyond the conventional timelines and into the deep time of cosmic events. The information doesn't arrive with a thunderclap, but with a series of soft taps like rain on a window pane, gradually revealing a landscape that was always there, just obscured. This quiet, persistent leakage isn't about conspiracy anymore. It is about the organic unfolding of human understanding, a gentle expansion of our collective awareness. We are simply remembering what was once known, allowing the ancient echoes to finally resonate in the modern world. The truth, in its own time, finds its way home. Now, imagine the end of a long day within those hallowed secret spaces. The last archivist, perhaps a quiet, unassuming woman in sensible shoes, finishes her work. She carefully places the last classified file back onto its shelf, the soft rustle of aged paper a final whisper in the stillness. Her cotton gloves come off, folded neatly. She walks the long, silent corridors, past the endless rows of shelving, each book a sleeping thought, each scroll a forgotten dream. The air, still cool and dry, carries the faint scent of old paper and dust. She reaches the massive blast-proof door that seals off this particular section of the archive. It is a door of immense weight, crafted from steel and reinforced concrete, designed to withstand not just time, but any conceivable intrusion. With a soft click, she engages the complex locking mechanism. The heavy bolts slide into place with a deep, resonant thud that vibrates gently through the floor. The sound is final, a punctuation mark at the end of a long, silent sentence. Then, with the flick of a switch, the dim lights of the corridor extinguish. Darkness reclaims the space. The 53 miles of secrets, the prophecies, the ancient histories, the genetic experiments, the cosmic charts, all of it is once again swallowed by the deep, protective dark. Dust motes, disturbed by her departure, slowly settle back onto the surfaces, returning to their quiet vigil over the sleeping knowledge. The silence that follows is absolute, profound, broken only by the faint, distant hum of the ventilation system, a constant, low drone that is almost part of the silence itself. The weight of these secrets, the vastness of this hidden history, can feel immense. But as the darkness settles, as the archives return to their slumber, know that you do not need to carry that weight. It has been sealed away for millennia, and tonight it will continue its deep, quiet rest. You have journeyed through these hidden corridors, touched upon these ancient truths, but now it is time to let them go. Let the images fade. Let the whispers become distant echoes. History rests in the dark. The universe turns in starlight. And now it is time for you to enter that quiet void too. Let your breathing deepen, slow. Feel the gentle pull of sleep, like a tide drawing you out to a vast, peaceful ocean. Release the day, Release the thoughts. Release the weight of all that has been. Just drift. Drift into the calm, the quiet, the deep, soft dark.